So we're going to roll back from this starting point. So just to touch on what we've done here in this first step, it was the aim of our sketches here was to create this part in an efficient way so that when we come to a time later on where we have updated information from our client, we're able to change the dimensions. So what we touched on last week was once we've put those dimensions into the sketches, it means that when you click on the solid body, you can see these numbers come up and these blue markers, and you can either drag them to increase, decrease the size, or you can type on the number and type in a new value to update it. All right, if you don't put the dimensions in your sketch, you're not able to do that. I'm going to roll this back. I'm going to just start this from scratch again so that we can get the basics of setting that sketch up correctly. All right, and that was using the offset sketch. So what we'll start with is a sketch on the front plane. So click on that front plane in your feature tree and click that little sketch icon, or click on the sketch toolbar and click sketch here in the top left corner. And we start with this with a rectangle. And when you draw that rectangle, deliberately make it larger on one side of the origin. So the origin again is that red arrow. It makes it easier for us to select the midpoint of that line and the origin. Okay, that's the reason we do that. So once you've created that rectangle, right click on that bottom line and press select midpoint. Hold Control, click on the origin and click coincident. So what that does, makes that bottom line coincident with the origin and the middle point of the line on that origin. So now when you grab these outside lines, you'll see it stay symmetrical around that. With this part that we're doing, the dimensions we have is the 25 by 25 on that top face. So that gives us, we're drawing this side view here, so that gives us a width of 25. So we're going to put that in down the bottom. For the height, we don't have a dimension, but we can guess based on what we can see here. And it looks a bit bigger, a bit taller than it is wider. So we've gone with a, we'll go with a 45. Can? Yeah. I'll grab your details in a sec. All right. So that sets up the basic shape. Now, when this part goes into production, and this is looking forward quite a long way, but in project 2, we're actually going to make that form bracket out of sheet metal. So it's going to be laser cut. It's going to be laser cut flat and then bent. Okay, so those two sides are going to be bent on a brake press. When you're making something out of sheet metal, or it could be acrylic as well, that's heat bent, okay, anything like that, the key design feature that it requires in your 3D model is a consistent wall thickness. Okay, so from the outside to the inside, going around the radiuses, around the curves, it's the same thickness. Okay, so that's why here with this sketch, it's a bit easier, or much easier and more efficient, instead of drawing that separate shape on the inside, actually just to offset the outside area. So the offset tool we looked at very quickly last week. So offset entities on your sketch toolbar. Included in under that is a few different options. So the basic way it works is you click on a line, and the yellow preview is showing you where it will offset that line to. All right, now with none of those options selected, it's just going to create a new line out in space. Okay, whatever dimension you had in there, and you can see if I move this first one, that second one's going to move with it. Okay, because it's offset, and you can see there the offset relation. We want a bit more control though, so whenever you do an offset, I would always suggest have add dimensions included. So when you add dimensions, it'll add a dimension there, which means that you can go and change that dimension to change your thickness. All right, so when we offset our shape here on the left, we'll have the thickness in, and so later on, if we need to change the thickness, because we're going from one thickness material to another, we just have to change one dimension. The other tools that Offset has here is a reverse button. So reverse will just flip the direction. The other thing you can see is the arrow. Okay, you can just do it with your cursor. Then it's got select chain. Now select chain is really useful when you have a segment, continuous segment of sketches that you want all to offset at once. So you hit select chain, and you can see the yellow preview now goes all along those segments. It's quicker than you individually selecting those different segments of sketch. Bidirectional will go both ways with the offset. Cap ends will either add an arc or a line to those ends. And then construction geometry, this is where you can convert your existing line or your new line to construction. Okay, so construction geometry is any basic line or shape that has been converted to for construction. Okay, so they're dotted lines. When they're for construction, they're not included in any features that you're using. They can be referenced as an axis or something to revolve around or extrude up to, but otherwise it's not included there. So if we have this shape, okay, and we do a cap ends and construction geometry change the base to construction, it means we've now got this nice enclosed shape that we can easily extrude. Right? So that's the basics of the offset. So we're going to offset this shape. Now before we do that, we're also going to put in these fillets or these radiuses on these corners. To do that, we use a sketch fillet tool. So sketch fillet up here on your toolbar. You put in a dimension, so I'll just lower that to 5. And then you've got a couple of ways of selecting which places to add your fillets. The first, you can select 2 lines, and you see the yellow preview between those 2 lines. The second is to select a corner point, click on a corner point. Or the last is to draw a selection box over all of the fillets or corner points that you want to include. And you can see that I'll include those bottom 2 there. Now when we're doing these fillets, we only want to do it to these top 2. So I'm just going to select those and press OK. And that's created those fillets for me. So when it's created those fillets, what it's done is trimmed away the straight line section and added an arc in between. And SolidWorks has added what's called relations for us. For you guys that weren't here last week, these little green squares are called sketch relations, and they can be for anything from setting a line to horizontal or vertical, having equal dimensions between arcs or lines, or in this case there's a tangent relation between this straight line and this arc. So using that fillet tool, it adds all that for us. And those fillets can now be changed by clicking and changing that dimension. So the last part here is the offset. All right, I want to offset 3 millimeters for the thickness. Now when I select one of these lines, you can see the offset going to the outside. I want it to go to the inside. All right, the reason being is my 25mm dimension here, taken from this drawing here, that's the exterior size. So I want it offset to the inside. What I don't want to do though is have this offset come around this bottom edge as well. So what I can do instead, select that bottom line and make it for construction. When it's full construction, I select the line up here and have select chains selected. You can see the offset's only going to go all the way to the bottom. All right, it's not going to include that construction line. We can also press cap ends, and you can see those little yellow segments down here. Okay, change that to a line. Right, you get the yellow line there. That's going to close off the sketch for us as well. Okay, so I just clicked to accept, and that's now completed that sketch profile for us. Okay. Right. So last step here to create the first form, this shape, is to go features, extrude, and we're going to go 25 millimeters. But instead of going in one direction, all right, from the front plane, which is here, because this part is symmetrical, all right, and it will be a lot easier to do this hole later if it's in the middle, okay, on the origin. We've changed that end condition of the extrude to mid-plane, and that then divides the 25 mil over both directions, so it's going 12.5 each way. Press OK, and then that's created that first extrude. So I'm going to leave that there for now. If you haven't, or if you've got to this stage already, please have a go at the next couple of steps. All right, so you want to cut off the curve at the bottom and create that hole through, and then the hole on the top. All right, and I'll come back to that in a second and show you how that's done. But we'll really want to make sure that you have that sketch correctly set up. Okay. So from here, all right, there's a couple of ways to do it. I deliberately just sort of left that blank for you guys to have a play around with creating those next steps. Because you could definitely do a fillet along this bottom edge. Okay, so we've done a sketch fillet when we're creating the sketch there, but you can also do a feature fillet, which is here, on any sharp edge. Okay, so how that works, the fillet tool, you can see there's 4 different fillet types. Typically, you only use the first type, all right? But when you get a bit more advanced, you can experiment. You select an edge, it's going to fillet that edge. Now, to see that, turn on full preview on the left. And you can see the yellow preview there where it's going to cut away that edge. So this is the 10 millimeter radius, okay, which means 10 millimeters to the left and 10 millimeters up, and then it creates an arc in between, and that arc's going to be tangent to those 2 lines. Now the total width is 25, so if we wanted to have like a nice semicircle across the bottom, we need that radius to be 12.5. Okay, and then you can see the correct size there. When you do fillets, you can select multiple edges at once. So I can select all 4 of these edges, and you can see what that would look like in the preview. So this is a perfectly fine way of creating fillets here for this purpose on this shape. When you're happy with the size, just press OK, and that fillet is a feature in your feature tree, which you can click and change the dimension of. If I change that dimension up to 15, you can see it's now left another sharp point at the bottom, all right, because the 12.5 doesn't fit. The other thing to be aware of though, and I'll try and mention this regularly over the next couple of weeks, the idea behind SolidWorks and your 3D modeling is considering your design intent, what you're trying to achieve. So if I'm trying to achieve a part here which is just, you know, going to be one size and it's never going to change, then it's fine to put in that dimension and do that fillet at 12.5 here because, oh, that's correct. But what happens if later your client comes to you and they say, oh, that part actually was 25 by 25, it's now going to be 25 by 40. All right? So you change that 40, but now you no longer have that semicircle on the bottom. All right, so if your design intent is to have that semicircle on the bottom, maybe it's not the best solution for you to use the fillet tool, because now, as well as changing that dimension from 25 to 40, I have to change the fillet dimension from 12.5 to 20 to maintain that semicircle. Does that make sense to people? Yeah. Right, so we're always going to look at a way that we can link our dimensions together, or link our features together, or do it in a way that saves us time down the track. So I'm going to delete that fillet feature, and I'm going to put this back to 25, and I'm going to show you a more efficient way of doing this design feature. Right? Now at the same time, I'm also going to do this hole. All right, so I'm not just going to concern myself with that curve on the bottom, I'm also going to cut that hole, because if I can do that in one step at the same time, it's going to save me a bit of time as well. So now that we've got a flat face here, we can sketch our next shape. We're going to sketch a hole and a semicircle on the bottom on that face. Now this is important, because if you don't do it on this face or the outside face here, you won't be able to do what I'm doing on screen. And I'll explain why soon. So I'll start a new sketch on that face, press spacebar, and I can go normal 2. So I'm looking directly at that face. First thing I'm going to do is create a 3-point arc. So on my sketch toolbar at the top, you can see there's a little arc with a drop down arrow. Click that and go 3-point arc. And what I'm going to do, how the 3-point arc works, you click once, you drag, you click again, you drag, and you drop. Okay, so that's what the 3-point, how it works. When I hover on this shape and on this end line, you see this little yellow point that comes up on the line? That there is signifying the middle point of that line. Now, I don't want to select that because it's going to add a constraint locking my sketch to that middle point. All right, I don't want that to happen, so just avoid that. Make sure you click a bit below it, and then across to the other side, and then down to the origin. A bit different at the origin. When I move down to that point, I do want this 3rd point of my 3-point arc to be linked to the origin. All right, so I'm going to click and drop there. Okay, my sketch looks like that. Now I want this to be a nice smooth curve coming around the sides. So like we did last week with that, our very first part, I'm going to select this line on the edge, hold Control, select that sketch, and make it tangent. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And if you followed those steps, that line should now be fully defined. Okay. Now the other thing that this has given us is a center point with which we can put our circle. So I'm going to grab the circle tool. So for anyone that wasn't here last week, the main way that we're going to select our tools for lines, rectangles and circles is with mouse gestures. So how to do that is you right click on your mouse and you drag, and you can drag left for a line, down for a rectangle, or right for a circle. You can also drag up for the dimension tool. I'm going to drop a circle on that middle point. And then I need to add a dimension for the circle. Can anyone give me a dimension for the circle? What it should be? 7.5. It's wrong, but we'll go with it. All right, and again, that's fully defined. Okay, so that sketch is now ready to go. So, what I'm going to do now is an extruded cut. Now this sketch is a little bit different because we've got one closed space here, which is inside that circle, but then we've just got a line here on the outside. The difference is, okay, it comes up with this box down here, selected contours. We need to select which areas, okay, we're going to cut away. Because we did this sketch on the face, it's also going to use the edges of that face to bound our different contours. Okay, so I'm able to select that hole on the inside and then these two bottom corners as segments that I'm going to cut. So then I can go change my cutting direction, which is blind 25mm, in case this width ever changes. I always want that cut to go through all. Okay, so no matter how wide it is, we're going to cut all the way through, and then press OK. You can see that's cut off that bottom edge for us. So the difference with this one compared to the fillets or the last tool is that if we now change that 25, you can see how that remains as a semicircle at the bottom, and the hole remains central to where that semicircle is as well. This does have limitations. Okay, I can't get to a certain point like here, it'll lose its semicircle, but I think that's fair enough for the constraints. You know, I wouldn't expect that we'd go from a size of 25 to 125. We might go 25 to 50, in which case it still works. But that's just to give you a little bit of an idea of how those different settings can work there. My last step to finish this part, on the top, I'm going to do a new sketch. If you've done all the steps correctly, you should find the origin in the very center of your part. So then I can use that as the center of my circle. This hole size is actually going to be different to the one on the side. I'm just going to make it 9 for now. And then features extrude cut, again through all. And there's our finished part. So give that a go. All right, I'll come around and help you out. All right, and then we'll get on to the next part after that, which will be part 5 here. Okay, so the next one we're going to do is this part 5. It's we do it in a similar way to the very first part we did, part 3. There's just a few little tricks we'll show with the sketching. Okay, a few more skills that we'll sort of add in. So start with a new part, and I've seen some people sketch this or make this part already. I'm not sure which plane you sketched it on. If you remember when we did this one here, we did it on the side. Okay, so but it was sort of standing up. We want to do the same for part 5. If you've done it lying down, it's not a big deal. We'll see how that affects things when it comes to the assembly. All right, we'll fix it up then. So don't stress about that. But if you're starting it from scratch now, start it on the right plane with a new sketch. So what we're going to do is draw the 2 circles. Okay, the 2 outer circles. And first things first, we're actually going to create a construction line that goes up the middle. Right, and by making that construction line vertical, that's going to mean that the top circle is always in line with the bottom line. Now, because they're the same size, we'll make them equal in diameter. And we've got that A to B dimension on this one. That matches here, A to B, which is 90. Okay, so we can put 90 in for this dimension as well.
So what plane are you on?
The right plane. Not a big deal if you're on something different, but I'm on the right plane. So, someone want to give me a dimension for these outside circles? Diameter? 30. I think that's actually correct. I'm impressed. Who said that? Oh, okay. Hold on. Okay, so that's good. And then inside circles as well, they need a dimension too. Anyone give me a dimension for those? The smaller ones? Anybody? 7. 6.5. 6.5. Pretty small. Doesn't matter, we'll fix it later. Now, both those holes are the same size, so make sure that we make them equal in diameter. Okay, we give them equal relations. That way, when we need to change the dimensions later, it'll be easy to do so. We don't have to change 2 numbers, we just change 1. The last detail is really just the straight lines up the middle. So on one side, I'm going to try and grab that line tool. Now you can see when I click on the circle, the lines are actually gone to a tangent line. I don't want that. All right, so if you want to sort of stop that from happening, just move your cursor back to the circle and then you can pull off again and it will stop being tangent. All right, to show that again. You know what? Can't even get it to happen again for me. I'm not going to bother. On the other side, because I've got this construction line at the middle, I can actually use that to mirror the line that I've got on the left. So I'm going to press Mirror Entities. Select the line on the left. And then under the box that says Mirror About, I'm going to click in there, click the construction line, and then you can see the preview. I'm going to right click for OK. And you can see that those 2 lines are going to be symmetrical around that construction line in the middle. So now I just want to add a dimension between them. Alright, and we're just about ready to create our shape. Last thing we need to do, like we did on that very first part we did, trim away the extra lines that we don't need. So where we've got the circle section at the top and the bottom that we don't need, use the trim tool to remove those. And then we go Features, Extrude to create that solid body. And then save. In this one, no. Haven't worried about it. Just blind, one direction, whatever thickness you think it should be.
Sorry, how wide was it? The middle channel?
I made it 14. So our next steps now, we've got 2 parts to go. Alright, so these are the 2 harder ones. Part 1 at the top and then part 7. Some people are looking pretty confident with this modelling, so I'm just going to open up as well the next part of the project. So on the blackboard now, if you go to CAD Assignments Project 1, you'll see this next file, Pulley Parts Refined Dimensions. And what that includes is this document here.
Oh shit.
And if we have a look, this gives us some added detail to our parts, some changed details, some changed dimensions and thicknesses. As well, it shows us the assembly. Right, so that general assembly, that's our last sort of step. Right, if we get there, we might start assemblies by the end of this class. If not, we'll be doing most assembly stuff next week. So I will come back to this document, all right, when we start to look at the other parts and how to do these changes. But if you're confident and willing to have a go already while you're waiting in class for the next stuff to happen, have a look through this and start trying to work out what you need to change. Okay. So we're going to now move on to part 1, which is the pivot pin. And to do that, just going to look at these two documents. All right, so the initial sketches and information here show us a bit about this part, and from that sort of 3D angle on the right, you can see that it's a bit of an organic type shape. It's not really a shape that's extruded straight up, and it's not revolved. All right. We do use a revolve feature in this shape to create this bottom section. So this bottom section, if you have a look again at that 3D, that part looks like it's 360 degrees the same kind of profile, whereas the top section has that sort of twist to it, where you can see here where there's two ellipses at a 90-degree angle. So how we're going to do this part is we're going to combine two different types of features, or in the end we'll combine 4 or 5. We'll create a sketch at the bottom, and that sketch will be part of a revolve, and that'll be our first part, our first feature of this part. Once we've created that revolve, we'll then have a flat surface on the top here to create some planes to do these ellipses and create what's called a loft, which will be this middle section. Right, so a loft enables you to go from one shape to another to another. Once we've done that, on the top we'll put a dome. We'll then cut a hole through the middle, and then to finish off we'll just smooth off the edges of that hole with a fillet. Right, so there's a few more steps to this part than the first couple that we've done. On this refined dimensions document, you can just see that fillet detail on this isometric view, and there's a few more dimensions here to help us with that revolve, which is the bottom half. So I'm going to focus on that section, okay, that you can see here, and that's going to be our starting sketch. So let's start with that. So new part, on the front plane, the origin, which is here, we're going to reference or have the origin based as this point here where my cursor is. Okay, so it's sort of the center of that line across the top and the center of the part. So what I'm going to do is sketch this shape that you can see coming out from there. So it's straight lines, an angled line, and then a curve at the bottom, and then another straight line coming up. So there's a quick and easy way to do this, so follow along closely. Now I'm not sure if you guys have noticed yet, but when you do sketch, when you move your cursor, there's a dimension that comes out with your cursor. You can see it on the screen there, it's 33, 39, 50. That's telling you how big your line is. It doesn't add a dimension, but it gives you a sense of scale. So if I want to get mine a little bit closer to scale, I can just zoom in, and now that's more about 10, 11, which is much closer to my end result. There's another setting for sketches and dimensions I'll show you later on today, which we'll turn on and start using, but this is just another thing there to help you when you are creating your parts. So first line there, second line, straight down, in, down, out at an angle. Now, you can move from sketching straight lines to curved lines without having to select a 3-point arc or a circle. What you do is you move your cursor out like you would continue on that line, but then put your cursor back in to that starting point. When you move your cursor out again, you'll have an arc tool. Now, depending on the direction that you move your cursor, that arc will come off at a different angle and be tangent to a different direction. it can be difficult to try and get the correct one. So the one I want is it not coming off at an angle, but coming off to the side like this. Now, I'm going to sketch this one incorrectly, just to explain something for you guys to pick up. And what I mean by incorrectly here, we'll see later on. See how we get these two guidelines? What this means when we drop our next point here, is going to add a coincident relation from the center point of the circle to that angled line. All right, and that's what you can see in the guidelines. I actually don't want that. I will delete it later. But just so you know, that's what's happening here when you can see that sort of thing. All right, and then my last line is going to go up straight back to the middle. This is the relation I was talking about. We will delete this later, but I'll just leave it for now. So I'm going to make this line vertical, and then I'm going to add some dimensions. So for my dimensions, I'm looking at this shape here. I can see there's 10 across the middle, so I can put that one in straight away. Now, I've only got half the size here, so that's going to be a 5. I've got a 5 on the end here. I've got a 45-degree angle. So dimension between angled lines, remember, select a vertical or horizontal one. Select the one that's on the angle. And then depending on where you move your cursor, you'll get a different value. So I need to dimension these blue lines that are left. So the one at the top here, that's about the total width. So if I have a look at this sketch, it's fair to assume that that 5 high is maybe the same here, 5 wide. Okay, so I can either add in another 5 here, I could add in a 10 at the top. The other ones we don't have dimensions for, so we have to sort of guess. But have a look at the geometry and try and work out the position. You can see that this line here, it sits within this edge. Okay, so I can drag that up and in a little bit. The other, I need to give that line dimension. Again, that looks pretty close to a 5 or 6. Might go 6 for that one. And then this last one, even though the line's on an angle, I can dimension it coming straight out, or I can move my cursor to a horizontal position. It'll give a sort of horizontal position between the two endpoints, or a vertical dimension between those endpoints. I might just go with 3. Again, some of the, even though this is refined dimensions now, what we might find once we put all our parts together in the assembly, it will tell us the missing dimensions. Okay, other parts will indicate to us what those dimensions need to be. The last one here, I need to dimension this arc, this radius. So just click on that arc, drop, and the dimension for that I think is 12. Alright, and now that part's fully defined. Okay, so that should be good to go. So we're going to revolve that. Now this revolves a little bit different to the one we did for the washer. Right, this one. The difference is with this sketch, there's a construction line in the middle, and so there's a hole when we revolve the router. In this part, there's no construction line. So when we press revolve, SOLIDWORKS waits for us to tell it what line to revolve around. Okay, so we need to indicate that we're going to revolve around this one. Click that, and then we get our preview. Press OK, and that revolves complete. I'm going to save this because there's a few steps, and if I lose them, I have to start again. So I'm going to save it here. Now, that might look good from the angle, but when I have a look at the front view, part's not quite right. Can anyone tell me what's wrong with this geometry? It's really hard to tell. It is very hard. But can anyone pick it up?
The lipped edge.
Sorry?
The lipped edge. Like how that one's coming to that. It's not smooth.
Where? Here? Where?
Oh, no, actually, don't worry. Wait, no, it's all good.
This part. Okay. If I change the angle, it doesn't really. You can sort of see it with the highlight here. Okay. This should be a nice smooth rounded part. Okay, as you can see in the PDF, it's nice and smooth and round across the bottom. Alright, this is where you'll start to develop a bit of an eye for detail. And eye for detail is very important for industrial designers. So what's happened, okay, there's actually a point at that very bottom. I can even select it there. I shouldn't be able to do that. Now, that comes back to this relation here I spoke about earlier. If you want to create a smooth shape, all right, like this, when we revolve it, okay, the center point of that arc has to be above that end line. All right, so it has to be sort of symmetrical. What we've got here, the center point of this arc is actually off to the right. Now, I'm going to delete that relation and just exaggerate it so you can sort of see what I'm talking about. So see that, how it's not smooth? Right? We need that to be smooth. So even though really here it was really close, it's not quite a smooth geometry across that bottom shape. What I need to do is move this center point onto this center line. Now, sometimes it can be hard to drag and drop, okay, because I don't want to add a relation. I don't want it horizontal with that line. Right, so if I can't just drag it, what I can do is just select, hold control, select this line, make it coincident. So now the center point of this arc is directly above the point there where it's revolving, and so now when it's revolved, it's a smooth surface on the bottom. Does that make sense? All right, very good. I'll let you, I'll just give you people a minute to get to that stage. All right, then I'll come back. All right, so next steps after that, we now need to create this mill section, which is the loft. So to do the loft, lofts always require more setup before you can do them. It's not like a revolve or a extrude where you create one sketch and then just do it. For a loft, you typically need multiple sketches or multiple faces already existing for you to loft between. In this case, we've got a circular surface at the top from our revolve, which we're going to use. Then we need to create 2 more ellipses. All right, so this loft is going to use 3 different segments. To create those ellipses, we need to create them at different positions where there's nothing we can currently select to put those sketches on. So we have to create a reference geometry to put those sketches on, all right, so that we can have them at the 2mm and 15mm sections that you can see here. And I think here as well, 2 and 15. So to create that reference geometry, select that face at the top, press reference geometry, plane, and the default is 10mm. We're just going to change that to 2 and press enter, and that creates a plane 2mm above that top surface. I'm then going to repeat the process from that plane 1. I'm going to do another plane that's 15mm above. Okay, so what you should end up with is this, plane 1 and plane 2, 2 different heights. So the first one at 2 millimeters, the second one at 15. Like anything else, they're editable. So later on, if we want to make changes, we can just click on the planes and that will alter the height of where the sketches are.
So that was 15 from the plane one, right? Not from the...
That's correct. 15 from plane 1. Okay, so now we've got those, we can do our ellipse sketches. So our ellipses here we have information for 18 by 12. So ellipses are different to a circle because obviously you can control a width and a length rather than just an overall diameter. So whereas a circle has, you know, one sort of shape, and you can see these sort of north, south, east, west points, you can't actually dimension from them. You can only dimension the diameter. But with the ellipse, now the ellipse is on the sketch toolbar here. When you sketch or start an ellipse, it starts with a center point and you drag out. It looks like a circle, but once you've clicked again, you drag the other direction, you can see the difference between the two. And with the ellipse, you can actually dimension between those points, okay, to define that shape. That's the difference between the ellipse and the circle there. So we're going to do an ellipse starting in the origin, go straight up and go to the side, and then we're going to add dimensions. So 18 by 12. And at this stage it's still blue. Reason being is that ellipse can be twisted. So we need to stop that from twisting around. So grab either the horizontal or one of those horizontal or vertical points, hold control, select the origin, and then add a vertical or horizontal relation. So that means it'll stay in line. And then you hit OK, accept on the sketch. And you can see that first ellipse there on plane 1. We're then going to repeat the process on plane 2, but this time the ellipse will go the other direction. So what you should have is an ellipse on plane 1 and plane 2 at 90-degree angle. What can be a bit of a trap for people is that when they've done the first ellipse, they've just then pressed sketch again and done a second ellipse and end up with something like this, okay, where both ellipses are on the same plane, or even both ellipses in the same sketch. Right? For the loft to work, they need to be separate sketches, and to get it from plane 1 to plane 2, the sketches need to be on those two planes. So if you accidentally sketched two ellipses in the one sketch file, something like this, you just have to delete one of them. Alright, delete it. If you've sketched both ellipses on the same plane, that you can just fix. So you can click on the sketch that you want to move, and there's a little shortcut that pops up that says Edit Sketch Plane. That enables you to change the plane that that sketch is on. So you can change it from being on plane 1 to being on plane 2, and it will move that sketch up to that plane. This tool is also useful for if you ever sketch something facing the wrong direction. So if you sketched a part on the top plane, but instead you want it started on the front plane, then you can edit your very first sketch and it will move it. Okay, and it should hopefully update all your features following it. If you've done a lot of features on a lot of different planes after that, then that can be a problem, but if it's just a very simple part, it's easy to fix. Alright, so the next step is now the loft. So on our feature tab up the top, you can see lofted boss base, and it asks you for profiles. So we're going to select 3 profiles. So our first profile is the edge of the circle at the top of the revolve. The next profile is the ellipse on plane 1. The last profile, the ellipse on plane 2. And then you can see the yellow preview, just looking pretty close to what we need already. These green points are control points, and they control the twist of the ellipse. The twist of the loft. Those control points come about from where you actually click on those lines. Alright, so clicking in random spots can sometimes cause issues. Alright, you might have something like this where you've selected all 3 but there's no preview. Alright. What happens with the lofts can be used to create very organic looking shapes. Okay, so you can create shapes with a bit of a twist to them, but if you twist it too far, it's not going to work. Okay, the geometry won't be able to work properly, and it'll break, and you won't be able to create that loft. Okay, the feature could not be created because it would produce self-intersecting geometry. So to avoid that, and also to try and get a symmetrical type shape, which is what we're going for, when you're having a look at this, it's pretty much the same both sides, all right, front and back. We want to try and line those up. So there's 2 things we want to do. First, we want to click on curvature display, which is on the properties on the left and towards the bottom, and press mesh preview, and that will bring up these sort of contour lines, or these mesh lines. Second, we want to line up those control points. So if we go to the top view, we can see how they're a bit twisted. Just bring them around so that those control points are all in line, either horizontally or vertically. And now you can see the mesh preview, it's much more symmetrical around those control points. So see that sort of curve at the top and around the bottom. And then when we have a look from the front view, we can see that's pretty well balanced front and back. So I press OK, and then that loft's completed.
That was just by eye, wasn't it? Moving the control points. It didn't seem to snap.
Yeah, by eye. Yep. So control points, you can't snap them. Okay, it's just by eye. Get them pretty close. All right. So when I'm at this point with those planes, once I've used them, I hide them normally. Just makes it a bit easier to do selections and to see what's going on in your object. This loft's looking okay, but there's some work to be done. I'm just going to bring up this view here now. Just having a look at those 2 profiles side by side. Can anyone point out the difference with our loft?
Dome.
We haven't done the dome yet, so I'm just looking at this section from this line to this line here.
Changes.
So it's filleted around this edge. Yep. Anything else? It's more rounded, yeah. So on this one on the left, we've got a really sort of sharp angle at the top and a sharp angle at the bottom, whereas on the sketch on the right, in that section view, what it is, it's tangential. So it's tangent to this face here, and when it comes around to the top, it's straightening out so that when it has a dome, it's going to be tangent with the dome as well. So there's settings that we can control in our loft feature. So we haven't done much of this going back and editing features yet, but if you ever need to edit a feature, you click on it, on that feature in the feature tree, and you click this icon here, edit feature, and then you're able to edit the settings of that feature. Okay, so if it's an extrude or cut, you can change the thickness or the depth. If it's a revolve, you can change the amount of angle. For the loft here, we're able to change some of these other settings. So if we look down the options here on our loft, the next box down, start and end constraints, is the one we're going to look at. So start and end constraints controls the shape of your loft at the start and end point of the loft. Typically, or by default, the loft will just go from point to point, and if you've got more than 2 points, it will just create a curve in between them, okay, to fit the shape. If we deselected this very first one at the bottom, you see it's just a straight line, okay, from the 2 sketches. But when you've got 3 sketches in there, it'll create a curve between them. We still want that curve, but we want it to be tangent at the bottom here. So start constraint, which is at the bottom. When I press that drop down, you see there's some options, including tangency to face. And that makes it with a nice curve here at the bottom. Okay, so that's a smooth loft around that face and that area. At the end constraint, because there's no other surface there to be tangent with, we don't have that option. Instead, we can use normal to profile. Normal to, okay, like when we select a flat face and we look directly at it, it's straight from that face. So normal to profile means it's going to come straight down and then start curving. Now these values here, you can also adjust them, okay, so you can increase or decrease those points. Again, you can do that to a point and then it will either break or stop working totally. Couldn't get that one to break, but you get the idea. For this one, we just keep them set at 1, and that's the correct size for us. All right, so I'm going to finish off the last 3 steps and then give you some time to finish off this part. On the top, we're going to do a dome. Now, a dome is not on this command manager tool up here. It's not a sort of commonly used feature. You can find it under Insert Features Dome. I'm going to show you though how to add a button up here. Okay, so if there's something you're going to use regularly, you can add it. What you do is you right click, you go Customize, and then on the Commands tab, you've got all these categories, and this is every single option in SolidWorks. Okay, so if there's something you use, you just bring a shortcut button up there onto your command manager. Under Features, we can have a look through, and here's Dome, and I can click and drag that up to the command manager. So if there's anything you use regularly, you can drag it up. I use Split, and I use Combine regularly. There's a few other shortcuts I have built into keyboards. We'll look at that later on. You can also reorder things and remove them. Like this tool Intersect here, I never use that. So if I wanted to be really efficient with my menu, I could just click and drag that off. I think I got rid of something else there I do use, but that's okay. When you're done, just close that, and that'll be set up there on your menu. And if it's a computer that you use all the time, whenever you log on, that interface will be exactly the same. So now Dome, I'm going to select this face here. Now that shape isn't correct to begin with, but on my options here on the left, I can click on Elliptical Dome, and that will straighten it out. It's still not quite right though. What I want is a nice sort of semicircle dome. Can anyone tell me what the dimension should be then? Sorry?
Was it 18?
No?
Oh, no, it's
And not 12. 9. Why 9?
Radius?
That's right, yeah. So that ellipse is 18 across. We want to go halfway up, so we go 9 up. It's okay. That's the dome. Looking good. 2 more steps. So now we want to create that hole through the middle. Okay, there's no flat plane to select for that sketch, but because we've sort of made this part around the origin, that front plane is right in the middle. So I can select that for my sketch. And this line here, when I hover over the line, I get that midpoint come up. I can click on that midpoint to create my circle. And that circle is going to be central to that dome area. Add a dimension. An extruded cut. Now, same as extruding mid-plane, you can cut mid-plane. So we're going to cut mid-plane, or we can cut through all both. So it's just going to have to go through everything both directions. Press OK. There's our cut. The last step, a fillet to round off those corners. So what we can see here, just to smoothen it off. Fillet, I select the face, and nothing happens. Now, if you ever see this with a fillet and you've got full preview on, the next thing you need to check is the dimension you've got in there. So this has a 10mm radius, which is way too big because the hole is only 11mm in diameter. My suggestion, whenever you've got fillets, you can't see them working, go to a small size and then work them up until they no longer work. So the fillet on this part is going to be 1mm. You can see there the preview works. If I wanted to see what other sizes I could go to, I could just keep increasing that size. Okay, 1.5 works, 1.6, 1.7. Actually, I might have crashed it. But eventually you get to a point where the preview no longer works, okay, and then you know you've reached your limit for that fillet size. And you can see that 1.8 doesn't work. All right, so stick it back to 1 and press OK. And that part is finished. All right, so give that a go. I'll give you a few minutes now, so I'll give you 10 minutes. So at 7:35 we'll go on to the next part, which will be the last one. So if you want to have a break, go for it. Or if you've got any questions, just let me know and I'll come around and help you out. Okay, so this last part we're going to do is the pulley wheel, and the most complex one out of the lot. The information we're given on this first one here with this section view shows us that the wheel's going to be created using a revolve. All right, much like we've done just on the start of the pin at the bottom and on the washer to begin with. So like the washer, this one has a hole going through the middle. So the first thing we are going to do is sketch this profile, get all that dimension fully defined, and then revolve the wheel. After that, we then will add the internal detail, which are these ribs, right? And those ribs have fillets on them, and those ribs are done using, once you've done one, we do a circular pattern to do the ribs, and then we mirror it all to the other side. Okay, so there's a series of steps, all right, that makes it really easy for it to be adaptable later, so we can customize it, change any dimensions if we need to. We'll also look at a little bit of draft angle, okay, to see how that works, and how to add fillets in a couple of different ways. All right, so first up, we're going to sketch this. Now, the other thing to note, when you're looking at a section view like this, and the notes says fillets to be used where appropriate, typically you would sketch it with straight lines. I'm talking about these smaller fillets. Sketch with straight lines, and those fillets are added as a feature later on towards the end of your part, because it's always easier to add to mirror parts, to create patterns of parts, to add details to things without the fillets. So as much as you can, leave the fillets till later on. So let's start this one off. Front plane sketch, and what we're going to do, we're going to combine a couple of the skills we've already learnt with mirroring sketches as well. So when you see this here with the section view top and bottom, we only have to sketch one of those. So we're only sketching this top half, but we're actually going to halve that again and only sketch one section and then mirror that to the left. So I'm going to start with 2 construction lines. So first step is 2 lines horizontal and vertical through the origin. This one here is going to be the one I revolve around. The vertical one's going to be the one that I mirror to the other side. Now, a lot like the pivot pin shape, I'm going to do all the straight lines here, and then we've got a curve at the top and a curve here just below that as well. I want you to pay attention to the way I sketch this and try and replicate that when you do it yourself. So first up, I need to leave a gap between this construction line here and my first line, so I just start above. Now, this line coming in here is going to be a 2-degree angle, so it's only going to be very slight. But if I drop the line here, it's going to add a horizontal relation, which I'll need to delete later anyway. So just make it a bit of an angle, we'll add an angle dimension later. At this point, I'm going to end the line and start a new one. Okay, so I've just done all the straight line segments. Now, I'm going to do 2 circles. It doesn't really have to start on the end point of this construction line. It can start on the middle of it, so long as it's central. And now I'm going to use powered trim. So the other thing with the powered trim tool I might not have shown you yet, as well as sort of trimming lines to the nearest endpoints, you can also extend lines. So this line here, I can trim that back, but if I drag that up, I can drag it up to this point, okay? And it'll extend that line as well. So it makes it very quick for you to trim, extend lines and get the sketch profile that you need. I'll repeat that process. Okay, so you can have another look. And there we go, it's done. Alright, now we can mirror. So there's some things, obviously when I've sketched this, because I've done it a million times, just done it, perfectly first time round. Alright, but there's a lot of little things that can get you stuck. So I'm just gonna scrap this and sketch again and show you some of those things that can happen without you even noticing. Alright, and then how you can rectify it. Alright, so the first one is if you accidentally draw that line horizontal, okay, it'll add that horizontal relation. That means that you can't add the angle dimension to it. Alright, so I'll come back to that. The next one is here. I'll come back to that as well. Okay, it didn't add it automatically, but I'll just add it in anyway. Some things can be added depending on the order in which you sketch things as well. Right? And then mirror.